Season's greetings. Welcome to our show, Ghosts Are Near, where we discuss various aspects of the paranormal and paranormal research. I am your host, Keith Johnson. I'm also the founder of New England Anomalies Research, also known as N.E.A.R. With me is my co-host, Sandra Johnson.
Hello there.
Also the co-founder of N.E.A.R.
I am that.
Now, we wish you a very happy and healthy holiday season. And with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest, who is also a very dear friend, Mr. David Manch. Yep. David Manch is the case manager for New England Paranormal. He's also the director of Southern New Hampshire Paranormal. So, studio audience, please help me in welcoming David Manch.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
It's great to finally have you on, Dave.
It's good to be here, too.
Yeah. So glad you made it here on this blustery, winter, seasonably cold night.
A typical
It is freezing out there.
I think so, yeah.
Right. But you're used to that.
Well, I live up in southern New Hampshire, so we're used to the Arctic weather.
Okay, so...
I think we're in the Arctic Circle, I'm not sure. But...
No, well, doesn't matter. We are or we aren't, it sure feels it. So, David Manch has written this book, There Are Ghosts in Our World, but are they all real? You can see from the promo here.
I guess we're going to find out tonight.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background, Dave, and what brought you about writing this book.
Sure. Well, I'm a former police officer. I was a deputy sheriff, and I also worked as a municipal police officer. So there's a little bit of a background in investigative work where it really kind of helped me segue into actually doing field investigation for paranormal research. But I've actually been doing research in paranormal for about 18 years now. So I've done a lot of reading, a lot of historical research in cemeteries and stuff like that. But about 3 years ago, I was fortunate enough to meet Mike Dion, who brought me into New England Paranormal and got my investigative side of my career in the paranormal field going. And over the last couple of years, there was a lot of information that I was coming across that I didn't see in other books, and that weren't information that just wasn't available to some of the investigators and researchers out there. And I wanted to find a format to put that in that I thought they might appreciate and enjoy reading. So the book idea was born from that concept.
Okay, and can we back up even further?
Sure.
Was there some sort of event in maybe your childhood or early adulthood that maybe sort of spurred you on into paranormal investigation, some sort of paranormal experience?
When I was a child, my mother had a friend who owned an antique shop, and she used to always talk about things being moved around and that they heard noises in the shop at night, and there were some tenants that were living in an apartment above it who were complaining that they were constantly finding chairs moved around, pictures that were removed from the walls, and really kind of spooky stuff. And I was about 6 or 7 years old at the time. And, of course, any kid would be fascinated by those kind of things. So I think that's where my initial interest came into play. But about 18 years ago, I was in the basement of a friend's house, and she was upstairs. I went downstairs to grab something. And I thought she was following me down the stairs because I could hear her footsteps as I was going down behind me. I got down, and I saw something move past me, right next to me. And I said, well, why'd you come down? If you were going to come down, you should have just grabbed it yourself. And all of a sudden, I heard from the top of the stairs, what? Who are you talking to? So
I've had that happen to me.
Yeah, and I never did find out who that was with me, but when I looked around, there was nobody there. So that kind of really got me going, and I started doing some real research into finding out what this stuff is, because that was pretty convincing at that point.
Looking back, now that you've become a full-fledged paranormal investigator and you've done all this research and had all these other experiences, what would you say, in your opinion, that was?
I would say more than likely because she did tell me that there were things going on that she couldn't explain, noises, and she didn't really say shadows and things moving around per se, but I would say it probably was a paranormal event. I would say based on the fact that it appeared to be a person, it was probably a human spirit.
Oh, okay.
So being a former municipal police officer, that has obviously helped you with your investigation techniques, right?
Right, certainly has. And one of the things that I've really transitioned those skills into was teaching the class in Boston, which is where I first met Mike Dion. And kind of helping people that are new in the field, and even people who have been in the field for a while, giving them some pointers on investigative tips. Really being diligent when you go in to look at everything. because some things are more subtle than others, and if you're not carefully looking for them, you're not going to find them.
Right. Exactly.
As you well know.
Right. Sandra, what questions do you have?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to mention that we very much enjoyed working with Mike Dion as well. We've
Oh, yeah,
done
Mike's a great guy, yeah.
a lot of investigations with him. Before I get to these questions, I just want to ask you if you can, you've investigated for many years now with New England Paranormal. What sort of stands out in your mind as far as your experiences investigating with that organization?
It's a great group of people. I tell you, I was very lucky to get into the group at all, and these people we have a diversified group of professionals, and when I say professionals, I mean professionals in their profession, not in paranormal research, because there are no professionals in that field. But they bring a wide array of skills to the table that really help us to help people. The whole point of doing the investigations is first and foremost to provide answers to the people who have activity going on in their homes, whether it's paranormal or a loose pipe banging against the furnace when the heat comes on. We're going there to try to give them some peace of mind, or to explain what's going on if we can. So the thing I really admire about New England Paranormal is the fact that it's just a great group of people and a great group of friends.
Right.
Even though I don't see my boss, Steve, very often.
Yeah.
No, I imagine you don't.
He's a pretty busy guy.
Right. So, of course, we're referring to Steve Gonzalez, our good friend Steve, who
Ghost Hunters.
is usually
Sci-Fi Channel.
involved with Ghost Hunters these
Yes,
days.
yes, he's a busy boy.
Yes, he is. But he has a copy of the book. It did get to him, so.
Oh, great.
Oh, good. I know you didn't bring along any video or photos or audio or anything, but can you give us some examples of any sort of interesting evidence that you've come across?
We actually have some great video stuff that we captured not long ago, and it came from the same location 2 different times. One instance where I was holding a flashlight, and I kept on feeling that there was something in the room. We were seeing black shadows moving around, forming in front of us, and one of the investigators was sitting in a large wicker chair, and the chair actually lifted off the ground, and you could hear it, and she thought someone
Wow.
had kicked it. But she was up against the back corner of the room, so there was certainly nobody behind her. This was in the basement. We knew that there was a child spirit in the home, and we actually captured some pretty startling EVPs that sounded very much like a young boy. And I asked if he wanted to play with a flashlight to take it out of my hand. And we have on video, and it's really, it makes the hair on the back of my neck, which is the only place I have hair left anyway, go back. It makes it stand right up watching this. The flashlight, as I was holding it, you can see I have a solid grip on it. And the head of the flashlight was pulling out of my hand and moving away from my hand and opening my fingers right up.
Really?
So we do have that on video. And in the attic of this same home, another investigator who was up there trying to do some provoking, when I told him, I said, you probably don't want to do any provoking in this home.
Good advice.
And he didn't do any provoking after what happened to him happened, but he was sitting on the ground like this. And as he was sitting there, he had just gotten done saying, do something, make a noise, do something. And just as he was sitting there, wham, he went face down right into the ground.
Oh, wow.
So he felt something shove him right in the back.
Ask and you shall receive.
And I told him that. I
Apparently.
said, if you tell something long enough to do something, it's probably going to get sick of listening to you, and you're going to get your wish. And you probably will wish you didn't get it. So.
Right.
But we have that on video, and that was, again, from the same location. Pretty
that's
cool
very
stuff.
impressive.
And I find this book very, very impressive, Dave.
thank you.
Actually, for any paranormal investigator, whether you're a seasoned veteran of paranormal investigation or you're a novice, I think this book would be invaluable because it not only explains the basic technique of paranormal investigation, it also explains many things that the paranormal is not, and explanations over why people think their walls are banging, or why they're suddenly hallucinating or getting migraine headaches, and that's why it's such practical advice, which I would recommend this book to anybody who is investigating the paranormal. I really would.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It gets, what I like about it is that it gets into the psychological aspects and the physical aspects.
Right.
Those are of particular interest to me. In fact, I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about some of the things, for example, the hypnagogic state, old hag syndrome, or I think maybe you use the term intruder syndrome.
Sure. Well, first, let me just say that the book is actually broken down into 3 categories: physiological effects and their influence on the paranormal, the environment and its effects on the paranormal, and technology. And the reason why I broke it into those 3 sections is they're primarily the 3 things that you're going to encounter during an investigation that are either going to be causing actual paranormal activity or a perception of paranormal activity, and sometimes both. But to go to answering your question, the hypnagogic state is actually something that I think I learned from you, and and it's something that you need to know. I think is paramount, that if you're going to investigate the paranormal, that you're aware of what a sleep disorder such as hypnagogia will do to your mind while you're in that state. You're susceptible to hearing voices, to seeing actual visual hallucinations. You're feeling like the feeling of sleep paralysis, as if something is taking over and controlling you. And a lot of reports of demonic activity, I think, actually come from people that are experiencing the sleep disorder and just don't realize they have it. It's terrifying. I've had it happen before. I've woken up, and it's very frightening to be suddenly pulled out of sleep and not be able to move, maybe see a shadow or something, and you're not sure what it is, or to hear something.
Yeah. It's so difficult, though, as investigators, especially for people who approach you with what they feel is a malevolent haunting, and one of the things that they tell you is that, they wake up and something's holding them down. They feel pressure on their chest. A lot of the things that they're experiencing are happening in the bedroom around where they're sleeping. They're seeing shadows or whatever is happening. And the first thing that pops into your head is, well, it's psychological. There's an EMF field there. There's something like that. But it's so difficult to tease apart sometimes. When you want to jump to that conclusion, but is there something else?
Well, there could be something contributing to it. There could be an EMF field that's coming through the wall from outdated wiring, or there could be a refrigerator on the other side of the wall. And we know how notorious they are for causing high EMF readings in a room.
Yes, right.
And people don't take that into consideration. They think, well, that's in the other room. That won't bother me. And we've even seen where baby monitors have been, and this is just, it freaks me out when I see it, but installed in the crib with the baby, and it's like, well, might as well put your baby into a microwave. It's terrible. I mean, people don't realize these things they're not designed to be shielded to keep that EMF field from going out, and it's a very high EMF reading.
Right. Of course, in your book, you mentioned the case of an actual house you investigated where the electrical wiring was coinciding with the water pipes running up through the family's living quarters, and
it was actually twist-tied right to the water pipes, the electrical line, so that every single sink in the house, in the building, was just amplifying the EMFs that were coming from this poorly shielded electrical wiring.
Right.
And plus, it's a code violation, so I'm not sure why they would have had it done that way anyway. But
exactly.
It's kind of crazy.
Right. And as you mentioned, that doesn't necessarily rule out that there is paranormal. I mean, there could well be paranormal going on. It could be feeding off these energy forces. And,
that was my point before. I mean, every time I hear someone explaining something that sounds like sleep paralysis, I automatically want to jump to the conclusion, well, it's psychological or it's physical, and it's, there's nothing paranormal going on.
You probably want to bring out the Persinger helmet and test them.
Well, we offer that as an explanation, and a possible explanation, because we tell people that no matter what we find and no matter how conclusive it may appear, we don't know with 100% certainty if that's the answer to what's going on. It
Until
could
you
be.
actually physically go out and investigate.
Right. I mean, we
which is
could
what
find
you're all
high
about.
EMFs and the person is experiencing sleep disorders, and we've actually captured that on tape where somebody was reporting being held down and touched while they were in bed, and while we were doing the investigation, we put a camera in the room with them and said, well, why don't you go lay down and see what happens? And after a short while, she cried out, "It's happening now." When we played the tape back, we could hear her snoring, and she'd fallen asleep. So
That's pretty conclusive. I
It's-
wish
it's fairly
always cut
conclusive.
and dry like that.
But the thing is we're not going to sit there and say that that's definitely an explanation that there wasn't anything paranormal.
Right,
But it's a possibility. And we just offer that to them. We're not going to tell them that your house is haunted based on what we see. That's up to them to decide.
Right.
Right. How about the chemical ghost? That's
I like
certainly
that term, the chemical ghost. Yes.
I coined that. I don't know if
Right.
anyone else has used it or not, but
Well, right here, we're giving credit to David Manch, the chemical ghost. He's
making
coined that
history
phrase.
here tonight.
Yeah.
yeah, actually what I actually see a lot of people that will report using different types of prescription medications. Having a background in biochemistry, I can actually have an appreciation for what those side effects to those medications are. So, of course, every question that we ask in our pre-investigative interview is kept confidential. And I explain,
course.
we need to know, and I want you to be upfront with me, if you're using prescription medications, there may be something going on that's a side effect of those medications that the client's not aware of. And I've actually had people, I've told them, please go back to your doctor and tell them what you're experiencing. They've done that and
That's good
had
advice.
their dosage cut down and said the activity stopped because it was a side effect of the medication. So I call that the chemical ghost because some of these medications will cause anything from blurred vision to hallucinations, tremors in your hands, where if you're asleep, you wake up feeling like something has just got done touching you or shaking the bed or the chair. And a lot of those are very viable explanations. And again, in 2 instances at least, we've had the person report back that when they went to the doctor and explained what they were experiencing, because I found the medical side effects, which you can Google online, included some of the things that they were reporting. And once they cut down on the dosage, it stopped.
Right, right.
So,
I know, that's actually part of our questionnaire too, is
Right.
To ask about medications. I feel very uncomfortable asking the clients, and I know many times the clients feel uncomfortable answering, but it's so important
Right.
to rule that possibility out, the medication factor.
Exactly, and a lot of them really, it's amazing if you look at the side effects. WebMD is a good spot to check that stuff, but if you check that and look and see what the side effects are, it's amazing how they line up to the reports of what's going on sometimes.
Right.
And on that topic, something else that really impressed me about your book was the way that you describe some of the things that can be attributed to tricks of the eye.
Right.
I was wondering if you could kind of go into that a little
Well,
bit.
you know, that actually comes from my personal experiences because, as you can plainly see, I wear glasses. I did wear contacts at one point, but because I have a problem with my left eye, it was not practical to wear contacts any further. And I have a floater in that eye as well, which is very irritating. And at times, if you're looking at a white background or other light-colored wall, if I blink my eye, I can see the floater moving in the corner of my vision. It will move right out. And if I blink quickly, it goes right back. If I blink slow, it floats across my
Right.
field of vision. And all it is just a clump of gel inside the vitreous solution of your eye. And it's not actually that you're seeing it. What you're seeing is the absence of light hitting the retinal wall because the vitreous, the clump that's floating in your eye, is preventing light from coming in and hitting the retinal wall.
Right.
But they're very annoying, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily something that people are seeing, but it's a possibility that a lot of people that say, I saw something out of the corner of my eye,
Out
because
of
we
the
hear that a
corner
lot.
of... We
Right.
hear that all the time.
Right. We do hear that out of their peripheral vision. And
Right.
you mentioned migraines, too. Migraines,
Right.
obviously, there are many types of migraines that do affect your visual field. And myself. I just came down with a migraine yesterday. I do get migraines, so I can really, really appreciate that, how it does affect your visual field.
And an ophthalmic migraine actually causes visual distortions. So it's possible that people who are reporting that they're feeling very depressed and they feel like there's a presence in the house. And we hear a lot of that, where people will say, I just don't feel very happy in my house anymore. There's something negative there, something they connotate as evil. And if they're reporting flashes of light and that they're actually seeing orbs, it's a good chance that what they're experiencing could be an ophthalmic migraine. And I'm not a doctor, but you know, I've researched a lot of this, and we have a lot of reports of it. So it ties together as a possibility. Again, not a conclusion, but you know, it's just something to offer them to look into.
Right, you want to cover all bases.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And speaking of something to offer, something else that you mention in the book on the topic of schizophrenia, how I guess there was a study in southern Australia. What was it?
University of Adelaide.
University of Adelaide.
Right.
People who tend to perceive hauntings or ghosts seem to score higher on measures used to evaluate schizophrenia.
Very true. That's what their survey said, and you can take stock in that any way you want, but you know, it's an interesting thing to look at, that there is a correlation between schizophrenia and reports of paranormal, because what is the primary symptom of schizophrenia? It's hallucination. And a hallucination is simply an event that seems extremely real to the person who's experiencing it, but in fact it's not something that's actually happening. So if there's a correlation there, I mean, it's an interesting thing. When I found that, I was like, well, I think I'll put that in there as a reference, because it certainly adds weight to the possibility that schizophrenia and the paranormal has some deeper meaning to it. It's certainly schizophrenia and alien abduction, which I didn't get into. I think I talked about the intruder syndrome just a little bit. There is a correlation there. I didn't get into that for the sake of the book, because we were trying to really stick to the spiritual side of things. But
Right.
And
Well,
of course,
that'll be a topic in your next book, right?
possibly.
but I was just going to mention that, you know, this is obviously another one of those uncomfortable questions that we as investigators have to sort of ask our
Exactly.
client and kind of get out of the way. You know, is there any sort of mental illness going on?
And we do ask, and we, you know, sometimes we do get some answers where people will say that, yes, they're in therapy, and they're not really willing to give us a lot more information beyond that. And that's fine. That's perfectly understandable. If they tell us that they're suffering from schizophrenia, it certainly doesn't mean that we're not going to go.
Right,
Because
right.
there's a belief also that people who are suffering from schizophrenia may be more
Vulnerable.
perceptual to actual paranormal activity. So they
Yeah,
may be
right.
they may be able to see
Heightened
things we're
awareness.
not. Heightened awareness, exactly.
Exactly.
And that could be a side effect from some of the medications, such as SSRIs, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and better known as Paxil and
Prozac.
Luvox and Prozac. So they actually create additional serotonin in the brain, which can bring about increased clarity. And there's an argument both ways on that that's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It could be good because they could be seeing things that the rest of us aren't capable of, but they also could be seeing things that aren't there. So,
Right. We'll get into certain levels of psychic awareness and perception, too.
exactly.
Yeah. And of course, you know, coming from a demonology standpoint, you know, something that we sort of firmly believe in is that, you know, these sorts of mental illness are a vulnerability that kind of a demonic entity would, you know, see as a doorway in.
Right. And, you know, and again, in the book, I'm kind of just going ahead of it when I was talking about trauma in the book. And I asked a lot of people before I actually sat down and wrote this, I said, what do you feel is the most powerful human emotion? And everybody right away said, anger, or anger. Well, anger is very powerful, but it's very fleeting.
Right.
Grief is very long-lasting. It can be very profound.
I found that a very, very significant point when you brought that out in the book, that grief is very, very prolonged. It's not as transient as some of the other strong flare-up emotions like fear and
Exactly.
anger. And I think that's a very, very good
I mean,
point.
you can be mad for a while, but I don't think that most people are going to stay mad for too long or try to stay mad. But grief is something that can really be impacting, and it can really change your life. And I think that people who are grieving, and this is something that you had discussed at a class, I think it was at Paranormal X, in fact,
right,
that people who actually are grieving in cemeteries, when they're actually grieving the loss of a loved one, can be more susceptible to an inhuman presence that may feed off that energy. Because the grief is actually a very powerful emotion, and it's releasing a lot of energy into the environment. So it's a good consideration that some people who are suffering from that profound grief may be susceptible to actual paranormal activity. And it's not just that they may be perceiving it as such because of the grief that they're experiencing.
All right. Well, this is going by so fast, and so this...
So let's quickly get a couple more questions in.
Right.
Digital photography, pros and cons.
Photography, I think, is the weakest form of evidence that you can gather from an investigation. I tell people, take pictures so you can have a visual reconstruction of the place that you investigated. That's what they're most valuable for, and as far as anything beyond that, trying to capture paranormal activity with a camera is kind of like looking for a needle in a haystack. You're better off using your other equipment, your other abilities to try and track that down. It's not to say that you can't capture actual paranormal activity using a camera, but because of the bright flash and the properties that are associated with most digital cameras, and not to mention the infrared autofocus feature, there's so many things that you can create anomalies just by taking a picture. You can't even be sure what you're looking at sometimes.
And as cameras, including digital, become more advanced.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So, again, they're great to use to take a visual reconstruction of the place so you can say, now where was that room again? And or where was that door, rather, in that room? And, again, what color was the room? Because color in psychology plays a big role,
exactly.
too.
That's a good point, yes.
Yeah,
I think
you
people
mentioned that
often
in your book as
overlook
well.
that. Right. Because the blues and the greens are very calming colors. Reds and blacks and colors that are darker tend to have an effect on your body to elevate your blood pressure. And you have a lot of learned responses from colors, so they can affect you in different ways.
Yes.
I feel blue, and you see red and you think stop sign, and yellow is cowardice, and black is evil. So we learn these responses as we grow up, and I think as you see those colors and you're in a room for a long time, and it can affect you in different ways.
Right.
Just as an aside, we really don't have very much good luck with photography either. Much better luck with EVPs.
Yes, you do.
Madam Sherry's Castle. Can you just...
yeah, in our last minute, I want to...
Right. It's actually what it was a country home for a woman named Madame Antoinette Cherie, who came to the New England area, and she was just looking for a summer retreat. She was very eccentric. She would drive around town in a fur coat. She built this stone house and ended up eventually losing all of her money and moved out of the house. The house was burned to the ground by some teenagers that were partying there. But the stone structures still remain, and there's a legend that it's a lot of paranormal activity is reported from there. I've investigated it many times.
I've been there, not since 1983, but it's a fabulous place.
It's incredible. It really is. They've cleaned the basement out so you can get down in there now. Most of the debris is gone.
Wow.
But we've never captured paranormal activity there. It's only 7 miles from my house, so I have no excuse for not checking it frequently.
We've got to go back there with you.
Anytime. I'd be happy to take you there.
Yeah, we've got to have you on again, too.
I know, yes, believe me. Time's up, and it's like we're just getting started. We have to have you back again, Dave.
Well, anytime, I'd be happy to. It's my pleasure.
And I don't think Dave even knows how much respect I have for him. I have a great deal of respect.
Well, it's certainly
very valuable.
It certainly returned as the book was dedicated to the two of you.
Thank you. We so appreciate that. Also,
Thank you, Dave.
We are very flattered. In the end of the book, Dave does include a questionnaire for investigators to use as an example, which is excellent. Well, thank you, everyone, for being with us. Again, safe, happy holidays. Dave, thank you so much. Please do come back.
Thank you very much, Keith.
Yes.
Sandra,
We're going to arrange that.
Good night. God bless.
Good night.